This video will show you how your floor can go from looking like this to this. Just watch this video and we'll show you how to do it. So this area shows a good example of how the sun can bleach the wood, because right here over the years with the sun beating over here, you can see how this area has been lightened. When deciding where you want to start the sanding, I find it best to start at a point where the crossover is going to be furthest away from the visible eye entering the floor. And also it keeps it consistent for us when we're going to remove these marks. Okay, so John has now finished the 36 and he started into the 60 grit. Take a look at that. So before we start scraping, we have to make sure our scraper is nice and sharp, and we just use a standard scraper like this. So the idea with the scraper is that you want to have the angle of that scraper. You can see that. So we have to go a little more way to sharpen the scrapers. Flat, onto the flat. Let's get away from it. A solid base. Should only take a few Normally we can Makita all that, but we're going to scrape this off. So in situations like this where we have this pre-finish here that's not coming off easily with the scraper, you can hit it with Makita. That's going to scuff it up quite well, and it's going to make it a lot easier to scrape this down and then go back over with the Makita. With this pre-finish, you can actually go against the grain just to score that initial finish off. Then we'll go back with you. So a quick point I'd like to make with the when you're using the orbital sander is an integral that you move in the direction of the grain, which is this way. Because if you go this way, you're going to put these massive scratches in the floor. I'm going to demonstrate to you what you don't want to do. You don't want to do this. That's what you don't want to do. Because you put these lines here, okay, obviously. You want to go this way. By going this way, we take all the edger marks off and the scraper marks too. So oftentimes when you're sanding, you're gonna find that there are sometimes deep crevices or marks in the floor that are too deep to sand out. And rather than putting some kind of pit or scraping too deeply where you put a visual dip in the floor, it's better to just fill it. And it's only certain times when I use this type of filler, but I find it's very effective for small holes, like if you had a cable hole up to say 3/4 for maintaining it, and that's this product here. I just find this product works really well for, as I said, a hole or a small imperfection like this one over here. So where you have a situation like this, we don't want to sand out this and put a big crevice here because it won't look good. We're just going to apply that filler, and it's going to hold in there really good underneath the urethane. Now I've applied it. Now of course I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to sand it and then wipe it, but it just blends in so beautifully. It takes a nice pigment of the stain, and then we're ready to move on after that to the urethane. As a contractor, it's invaluable to me, and I use it very often without, you know, having to cut out the wood and put another plank in, because sometimes that's not really an option. So this comes in handy for that. And it hardens very, very quickly, and it's very hard. It's not like a latex filler, which is kind of cracks out really easily. This is more hardens up really well. It's oil-based. So once you apply it and it's hardened, it's pretty well there to stay, because you're going to be covering it with you know, your stain, but then you're going to be putting urethane on top as well, right? So I can't stress the importance of having a clean floor before you begin your staining process. And if you're not staining, you're beginning your urethane process. So I know it's obvious, but you really want to have a clean, pristine floor before you begin. So spend a great deal of time vacuuming the sills, vacuuming the tops of the baseboard, and where, you know, vacuum between the cracks, and it's all obvious reasons. You don't want any of that material in your final product. So when you find your staining, you want a pristine, clean floor. So I'm spending a great deal of time vacuuming, then I'm going to tack the floor, and then we'll be ready to stain. So once I'm finished vacuuming thoroughly, I then take this Bennett tack cloth and I tack the entire floor with it. So this is used to get the residual dust or film that's remaining on the floor surface even after you vacuum, because there'll always be that residual film. So even, you notice here when I just wipe my hand on here, and you look at that film, so that's not coming off. So that's why this tack cloth is great for doing that. Just to take that residual film. Again, the cleaner your floor is, the better it is for your stain absorption, right? So you don't want, you want to get it as clean as you can. And I find that with this tack cloth, I can rotate it around 4 times on the applicator and then discard it. So I'll just cover with you how I put the tack cloth into my applicator holder. It's just a Richard applicator holder. Clamp style are great. You just put it on there, clamp it down, go to the other side. You may have another method. You're not going to want to get on your hands and knees and do this. I suppose you could, but that's going to be awfully back-breaking, and I don't recommend that at all. So when you put it in this applicator holder, and they're so quick to put in, you just clamp it up like that, and then you clamp it down, and then you're ready to go. Okay, so I've worked up my applicator onto the hole sander here, and you'll notice it's nice and pristine clean now. Okay, you see that? It's beautiful. I'm just gonna start at far wall. Just move it across the floor. Nice and slowly. So I usually will check it. Again, the more time you spend vacuuming, the cleaner your floor will be to start with. So I'll normally check this after about 60, 70 square feet because it will clog up. Obviously the tack cloth's is going to be getting all the dust that's on that floor there, so it will clog. And then what you're going to do is you're going to adjust it. So now you see it's clogged now. And that was about, probably about 60, 70 square feet. So you can see it's clogged here. And at that point, I just take it out of the applicator holder. You can run this over to the vacuum, but you don't want to use that same surface, and then what you'll do is you can flip it over and then use the clean side again. So, and there's a bit of a clean side down there. So I usually flip this 4 times to just maximize the use out of it, and then you pitch it in the garbage. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, you can see what the tack cloth now looks like. And that's just going one application. My floor is that much cleaner. Now I'm going to redo the same process again with a second tack cloth. It's well worth doing it. It just makes your floor a lot cleaner for when you go to stain it. If you like the way I do my floors, all the products that I use are listed in the info section below. So just check there for what you need. This job we're using the Early American Wood Stain by Varathane. As with all stains, oil-based stains, you want to slowly stir it to bring all the pigment up from the bottom of the can. You see how it just sits there? So as this sits in the shelf at your local retailer, you will see that the pigment settles right to the bottom of the can. Now in this particular brand, or this particular tint of Early American isn't too bad because it's not really one of the darker stains. But when you get into the heavily pigmented stains, like dark walnut, ebony, or Jacobean, they will have a lot of the pigment settle to the bottom, and it settles like mud there. So you really have to be sure that you stir it up very thoroughly and bring it all into the liquid. So after stirring it for quite a while and you can feel there's no pigment on the bottom, then it's ready to use. You also have to stir it in the pan if it's sitting for quite a period of time. So when I'm staining, I like to saturate my applicator. It's just a standard Varathane 10-inch synthetic applicator. And what I do is I saturate the floor. So you can see I've applied the stain here now. And now I'm going to remove it with this. Remove it with a sponge mop. I'm going to show you what it looks like after I do that. So after you've applied the stain, you then take the sponge mop and you remove the excess. And it looks beautiful. On the ends of the planks, what I do is I just take this rag and you wipe it off. And you just blend it all, make it look right, make it look blended, that it looks normal. And then when that dries in, that's going to look beautiful. There's no marks, you can't see any edge lines, any marks like that. So that worked out really well. Now there is one thing I'd like to note about this sponge mop. I don't use it perfectly clean, I actually saturate it in the stain and wring it out. So the reason that you don't want it totally clean, if it's a brand new sponge mop and you go to wipe it off, you'll actually remove too much of the stain, so you'll make it too clean, and then later on into the staining process, what's going to happen is it's going to get darker because your applicator and your sponge mop are going to begin to get really saturated, so it's going to look darker. So one thing you want to do when you're staining and when you're removing with the sponge mop, so as I said previously, you can do a total of 6. So you can do 1, 2, 3 will cover, the applicator will cover these 3, and then the next 3. So what I'll do is I'll do 2 entire widths of the applicator to get 6, and then when I remove it, I will remove the same amount. Now there's one thing you'd want to do as well when you're removing the stain. I'll actually go back to the 7th plank, like so, the 3, then the 7, and start removing, and always stay on the seam of the planks when you're removing, because if you go halfway through a plank, you'll actually sometimes see a line difference from the applicator. So try to stay against your plank where the seams are, and you'll find you get a better result that way. Okay, so it's starting to look good now, shaping up. Just applying the stain, and I'll give you an overall look when I'm done. Okay, so I'm back on the job site here the following day, and some Yahoo decided it was a good idea to walk on the floor, so I just thought I'd point out how to correct this problem. So there was a big footprint here, and over here, right by the door, I guess someone came in. And so now what we got to do is we're going to correct that. And you correct that by taking a piece of 100 grit paper. Where you see a footprint, we're going to blend it. We're going to sand it. So this is an after stain job here. We're going to see, because you got to get that footprint out. It looks ridiculous. Right? But it's not the end of the world. I'm actually going to sand it out. These are the kind of things you have to deal with from time to time. So that's the first step. So the next step is to take our trusty tack cloth. So we want to wipe off this area with the tack cloth, just to remove all that dust we just sanded. Right. Now another thing you can do if you didn't have a tack cloth handy, and what I'll do sometimes actually take tape. You just roll a piece of tape like this, and you go over the entire area. That was walked on where you sanded. Now I did already clean this with the tack cloth, but never hurts to do this anyway. If you didn't have a tack cloth, you can even just get a clean rag to get the majority of it, or if you could, I don't really like to run the vacuum cleaner onto the stained floor because it tends to put these wheel marks, and unless you're going to carry the vacuum on or you have a carry-on vacuum, you don't want to be doing that. So if you can extend your vacuum to vacuum it up, that's great. Sometimes you can. If it's just a small area, you don't really have to get all involved with the vacuum cleaner, but that's how you get it ready. So now we can restain those little spots there just to make them normal. I'll show you how we do that. So you just take your brush with the stain on it. Now here's where being Pablo Picasso comes in handy. You're actually using your vision just to blend this in. So now we had to apply stain. Wherever we took it off, we have to reapply some stain, right? I know what you're thinking, that this does not look right, and no, it doesn't, but we're not done. So you just put some stain on there, right, on those spots where the footprints were sanded out. And then I'm going to take our clean rag and we're going to blend this in. And that's how you correct the boo-boos. Now it looks still wet, but the color, what we're looking for is the color to be completely blended. Right? It looks shiny because it's still wet, but so that blends in quite nicely. And now we've corrected the boo-boo. No more footprints. So here's an overall look of the room now. This is the following day. It's dried in. So it's all ready to go. It's nice and dry. Ready for the first coat of urethane. If you'd like to finish your floor the way I did in this video, I've provided links to everything you'll need in the description below. So this job, again, we're using the Fabulon satin urethane, and these come in quart cans only. So obviously what you want to do is prepare all the urethane ahead of time. So if you're using quart cans, then you want to make sure you have enough pre-prepared before you start urethane, so you're not doing this while you're doing it. If you have the gallon or the big, you know, the 5 gallon or the gallon drums, it's not as big a deal, but anyway, just have it all ready. So when you're working with this urethane, we want to make sure we stir it really well. We don't want to shake it. We stir it just to get all that white, the white satin mixed into the clear. Because these urethanes, the satin urethane is actually a mixture. You have the clear and then you have the satin pigment that has to be brought in and mixed with the clear. And you'll know with the gloss Fabulon, it's almost like motor oil or honey. It's just a golden color and there's no pigment in it whatsoever. The semi-gloss is 50%. I'd say 70% of my customers want satin. So it seems to be very popular. So that's what you do, just keep stirring it up until all that satin is mixed right in and it looks nice and creamy. Okay, so we're applying our first coat. What I like to do is I like to put a rolled up piece of tape on my wrist and have another rolled up piece of tape here. And just as you're going along, you can grab any pieces of dust or hair that you see. Always stop popping up for some reason, you know. So what I like to do, I've applied 2 widths of the roller here, because 1 roller width will do 3 planks, so you can see the 6 are done. But I like to go back, after I've applied the 2 widths, I'll go back to this, so there's an overlap where the 2 where the overlap is, the seam. I'll go back over this with my roller against here, and I'll just run it along that line. And then I'll move forward. So apply the tube, and I'm going to go back one plank. It's going to do the overlap. And now I'm ready to move and advance forward. I want to show you a trick for removing hairs. You see there's a hair there? There's a piece of a hair or something. Take the edge of your brush like this, poke into it, and you lift it out. Go back over with the roller and it's gone. We always have to plan our exits when we're putting urethane on. You find yourself backing out an awful lot of the time. So the first coat is dry. You can see it's looking quite nice. So we're going to screen sand this now, vacuum, and then do the next coat. So oftentimes we'll run into a situation like here, underneath the bull nosing here. You can see where I've missed some of the stain, right? So that's easily corrected. You take your Minwax touch-up stain pen. And we'll just go under here, like so. Just go under here like so. Once you don't get it on the carpet. And now all the stain is applied under there. The next step, we're going to take this screen's 180 grit screen, put it into our Richard applicator holder. These are great things to have, these applicator holders. And the modification they put on it, put the quick release snap on it, just makes it so much easier to use. So now I'm going to take my 180 grit, and I'm going to screen sand the entire floor. So what we're looking to achieve here is that we lightly sand the floor with this. We don't have to put an excessive amount of force on the applicator because we're just trying to scuff off the raised grain. After you put that first coat of urethane on, it tends to raise the grain, especially in the really high grained areas. It'll bring it up. It kind of lifts it, so it gives it a little coarseness, a little stubble, right? So we want to just knock that down so it's smooth as glass, and then we can then vacuum and tack it for our next coat. So after screen sanding, you should have a white powdery film all over the floor, like this, and that's completely normal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to vacuum, then I'm going to tack the floor before I begin the next coat. Okay, I can't stress the importance of a good thorough vacuuming before you tack the floor. I'm just going to demonstrate what I go through. I actually go through all the planks, and I even go through the cracks between the planks. The process of cleaning between the cracks with the vacuum, I actually do after I vacuum the entire floor. Again, we just want to get the floor as clean as possible before we're going to wipe the floor after this, and we just want it as clean as possible for the next coat. So you might spend another 10 minutes, but it's definitely worth it, and it's going to save you a lot of aggravation, because things always pop up. You've got little hairs, you've got little particles of things that just seem to drift from who knows where. So it's always just good to be really clean on the floor before we get going on the next thing. Once you've finished vacuuming, prepare some rags that will be used on this applicator to wipe the floor with. You'll note while I have vacuumed the floor, there's still a film on there. You could argue that the film itself is the urethane in the powdered form, so it's going to blend in with the Fabulon, which is what it does. But I still like to wipe it off, and I like to be pristine clean. I'll do this floor twice. And I just find it's better to clean it off. You might as well just clean it off, even though the vacuum didn't pick all that up. So I've saturated that rag, and I've just wrung it out so it's not completely, dripping. And you just go across the floor like this. It's a very simple procedure. Very simple procedure, but it's, and it only takes a few minutes, To do a couple 100 square foot room, I could do this twice in about 15 minutes, so it's not a big deal. And it really makes a big difference in removing that residual film. So here's the result of what wiping the floor looks like after about doing 100 square feet. So you can really see where it's building up here. So at the job now, the second coat has been applied. Let's take a look around here. I'll be going through the same process I did yesterday. Screen sanding, vacuuming, tacking, and then applying the final coat of urethane. If you found this video helpful, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. And stay tuned for more upcoming videos on how to sand, stain, and finish your hardwood floors.